Aden, 24,000 men and women wanting to get into Yemen, each prepared to pay $150. You can do the maths. Therefore, if you're a pirate and you have very low success rates at sea, we can make some money elsewhere. So we see an increase in human smuggling commensurate with a reduction in pirate activities. And to be fair, the Puntland authorities on the north coast are trying to stop the pirate groups. And we've seen one or two incidents where Puntland security forces have broken up pirate groups on the north coast, which is only to be encouraged, and we need to make sure more of that goes on. But nevertheless, despite the fact that one or two ships since December, January, February, March have been seized, the IRTC is a reasonably stable, well-patrolled, well-coordinated piece of water. And I would encourage you to continue to use it. Next slide. Why do we, people often ask me, why don't you do convoys, Hudson? Convoys are the way to do it. We did a lot of them in the Second World War. And I suppose in an ideal world, convoys would be first rate, first choice. Second World War, of course, we had lots of intelligence on where the submarines were, and we could sidestep them. The number of convoys going across the Atlantic, whilst high, we could control because we were in a global war. We could muster all the ships together and sail them at the military's direction. This is not the case with the Gulf of Aden. Gulf of Aden is a commercial highway, and at any one time we have over 200 ships in that 500-mile stretch of water. For me to try and control that in a fashion which runs convoys on a regular basis is way beyond my means in terms of warships at my disposal and would really irritate industry. So what we have targeted is the high threat areas, and this is a rough demonstration you can see on the slide. From where the pirates operate on the north coast of Puntland across to Yemen, where they generally run. People out, piracy on the way back. And what we try and do on our group transits is make sure in that high-risk area, where we can concentrate ships, sunrise and sunset, we get those ships through as a group. So as they come through to that high-threat area, I have warships there and aircraft and helicopters to ensure that if anybody tries anything in that corridor, in that high-risk area, we can respond to it. And thus far, it has been reasonably successful, with only 2 ships attacked in the time that we've been running group transit. So in terms of an indicator, we do reasonably well. I'd love to do convoys, but I don't have the assets. Other nations do. China, India, and Japan, every 3rd or 4th day, they run a convoy, one way or the east or west. But because in cases like India and China, they have national shipping organizations, they can direct in a much more dominant fashion than we would want in Europe. So group transits work. Next slide. Now, the Somali Basin is the area to the east of the Horn of Africa, 10 times the size of Germany, density much lower, 2,500 to 3,000 ship movements a year, excluding the fishing fleets. So 1/10 of what we see going through the Gulf of Aden. So remember my priorities: World Food Programme, then I'm going to make sure the Gulf of Aden is secure, and with what I've got left, I'll try and do something in the Somali Basin. And that's where my priority sits today, number 3. You can see last year roughly the same in the post-monsoon period in the spring and then in the autumn with the number of ships taken. And thus far in March, 4 ships have been seized, including 2 outside my area, 10 attacks. But what this slide doesn't show, and I'll come to it shortly, is that we have broken up, intercepted, disrupted, dismantled 19 different pirate groups between myself and NATO over the month of March. What does that tell us? The pirates are out in real force in the southern Somali Basin. Having seen the lack of success in the Gulf of Aden, where else can we go? So they're heading to the south, and whilst we are disrupting and breaking up a lot more pirates, they're still having successes against the greater volume. Next slide. This is where I've been operating, and this just shows a slide over the last 3 weeks. These blue dots are where my ships have intercepted pirate action groups. You can see right the way across, well outside here. So a lot of activity in the southern part of the Somali Basin. A little bit up to the north, 1 or 2 attacks. These are ones well outside, just off Yemen, outside the corridor that the seizures have been taken. And that's that one outside my area out to the east. These are the attacks, largely against fishing fleets, and then down close to the coast, 1 or 2 ships coming up through the Mozambique Channel into Mombasa or Dar es Salaam have been attacked. That is their area of activity. Why is this of interest to me? This part of Somalia is governed by a terrorist organization, the insurgency organization, which is trying to defeat the government in Mogadishu. All the way up here, we see Al-Shabaab as it's known. Now, when Al-Shabaab had a greater dominance, ran Islamic courts, ran the country in a fairly fundamentalist way, piracy dropped off. What we're seeing now are pirate camps to the south in Al-Shabaab territory, surging out into this area. Now, why is that? So we want to get a better understanding of the links between some of these insurgency groups and piracy and where the money is going. This is a huge amount of activity just to be done by chance. There's a method in their madness from this part of Somalia. But you can see over 100 pirates processed by my ships. This is about 5 days old, this slide. 14 action groups smashed up. We burn the skiffs, we throw away the weapons, we destroy the fuel, we destroy the ladders, and we dump them back on the beach without the means to continue their pirate group. So my challenge is, how do I get those 100 pirates in front of a judge to go to prison? And the difficulty is we don't have, in this region, a country that will prosecute conspiracy, and that's a constraint. If we have a ship that is attacked, and I can see the pirate group, however tenuous the link, we can genuinely get them into a court. And that's why we've got 11 in Seychelles, and another 9 have gone in this morning. Next slide. That's what a pirate camp looks like, for those of you who haven't seen one. This photograph was taken about 2 weeks ago, and it's in Haraderi, which is in the northern half of eastern Somalia. These are the attack skiffs. These are the sort of mother skiffs that they use. You can see the fuel stored in the area, the ladders, the stores for the food and so on in these areas, and the notional marking of the fishing company as their sort of deceptive plan. We've seen through it. But you can see this is where they go. There's no fishing nets. There's no legal activity here. This is an out-and-out pirate camp. Next slide. And that's the sort of groups that you can see. A lot of fuel, a lot of stores here. These guys are going out to be at sea for upwards of 3 to 4 weeks to get that 1,000 miles off the coast to try and intercept your ships as they run through the areas. Next slide. And that's why what I want to do with, as discussed at the end of last year, is just have a slightly improved approach to the Somali Basin. Remember, priority number 3 after humanitarian in the Gulf of Aden, we want to build what in the military we would call a layered approach. Let's get lots of intelligence, ISI intelligence, surveillance all the way along this coast by placing ships off those camps that I just showed you. And we do that, and we've got 2 ships there today. But from there down to here is 1,000 miles. And with 2 ships, they cover about 150 miles each, 700 miles unattended. So those groups get out. I then put ships in the deep field out here to intercept those pirate groups, and you saw them. I base aircraft in the Seychelles.